I was 5 years old the day my world shattered. The airport smelled of coffee and jet fuel, a strange combination I could never forget. Rolling suitcases bumped along the marble floors, and travelers bustled past in a blur of coats and hurried footsteps. My parents held my hands, or at least I thought they did. My mother's grip was loose, distracted, her eyes scanning the terminal. My father stood a few steps away, pretending to check his phone, but I could feel the tension radiating from him like heat. They told me in their calmest voices to sit on a bench for just a moment while they checked the flight information. I obeyed, clutching my small backpack, my little heart full of trust. I thought they would be back quickly. I didn't know that this brief separation would mark the beginning of a lifetime of questions. Minutes passed. I looked around, hoping to see their familiar faces, but the bustling crowd, the loudspeaker announcements, the rolling luggage, it all became a confusing, frightening blur. I called out their names. My voice was small and shaky, swallowed by the constant roar of the terminal. I tugged at my mother's sleeve when she returned, only to find nothing. She wasn't there, my father. Gone, the bench I had been told to wait on suddenly felt impossibly cold and lonely. I cried, a silent, desperate cry at first. Then louder, until a kind stranger noticed me. She knelt down and asked my name, her eyes full of concern. "Where are your parents, sweetheart?" I shook my head. I didn't understand. They had taught me that they would always come back, that they would always protect me. But they weren't coming back. Airport security arrived, taking me gently by the hand. I clung to my backpack, as if it were the only thing left of the life I knew. They asked questions I couldn't answer, wrote down my name, called my parents' phones, but there was no answer. I was too small to fully comprehend what had just happened. All I knew was that I had been left behind, abandoned in a sea of strangers, with nothing but the echoes of my parents' absence. That night in a small, sterile foster home, I stared at the ceiling and whispered into the darkness, "Why did you leave me?" There was no answer, only the quiet hum of the heater and the faint scent of antiseptic in the air. I learned at 5 that love could be conditional, fleeting, and cruel. I learned that some promises were broken the moment they were made, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the hurt and the fear, a seed of determination took root. One day, I would understand why. One day, I would reclaim what was taken from me. The foster system is like a revolving door, people in, people out, none of them staying long enough to matter. I learned early to shrink into myself, to make myself invisible. Crying was dangerous. Hope was dangerous. I had grown used to the gray walls, the unfamiliar voices, the fleeting comfort of strangers who would vanish without warning. I had accepted quietly that love was a luxury I was never meant to have. Then I met Daniel Carter. He came into my life like sunlight breaking through clouds. I first saw him at the adoption agency, leaning against the wall, smiling gently at the children waiting for him. When he crouched down to my level, his eyes were kind, curious, and patient. "Hi," he said softly, "what's your favorite color?" It was such a simple question, yet it was unlike anything I had ever been asked before. Most adults ignored me, scolded me, or told me to be grateful. Daniel, however, wanted to know me. I whispered, barely audible, "Blue." He nodded. "Blue's a good choice," he said, and that was it. No judgment, no pity, no pressure, just acceptance. From that day forward, Daniel showed up, at school plays, at doctor's appointments, at birthdays. When I spilled juice on his carpet, he laughed, not angry, not frustrated. When I woke from nightmares, clutching the sheets, he stayed by my side until the fear melted away. And most importantly, he listened. He never asked about my past, never pressed for details I wasn't ready to give. He simply said, "I'm here. You're safe?" I remember the day he officially adopted me. He knelt down so we were eye to eye, his hands on my shoulders. "I don't know who left you," he said, his voice steady, "but I know who's staying. I choose you." For the first time in my life, I believed it. I believed someone could love me without conditions, that love could be unwavering, that family wasn't just a word tied to blood. It was a promise, and Daniel kept his. Over the years, we built a life together that was full of ordinary miracles. Sunday pancakes, trips to the park, bedtime stories that lingered long after the lights went out. He taught me how to ride a bike, how to stand up for myself, and how to believe that I deserved happiness. Slowly, layer by layer, he helped me stitch together the pieces of a heart that had been broken in an airport terminal years ago. Daniel didn't just give me a home. He gave me roots, a sense of belonging, a foundation that no amount of abandonment could ever shake. And though the memory of my biological parents lingered like a shadow, it no longer defined me. I was no longer a lost child. I was a child chosen, cherished, and loved in a way I had never known, and deep down, a quiet resolve began to grow. If I had been abandoned once, I would never be powerless again. I had always known that life was fragile, but nothing prepared me for losing Daniel. Cancer crept in silently, relentless and cruel, claiming him piece by piece. I watched the man who had been my anchor, my protector, my unwavering source of love, weaken day by day. I held his hand through the nights when he couldn't sleep, brushed his hair back from his forehead when fever made his skin burn, and whispered stories we had shared, trying to hold on to him with words when my arms could not. The day he died, I felt a part of me die as well. The room was still except for the shallow rhythm of his breath, and then silence. I clung to his hand long after it went cold, refusing to let go, my tears falling like a storm I couldn't stop. For a moment, the world seemed unbearably cruel. I had survived abandonment once. Could I survive this loss too? A week later, I received the will. My hands trembled as I unfolded the crisp paper, fearing, yet hoping, for what I might find. Daniel had left me everything: his home, his savings, his company shares. The total sum, $5,500,000, was staggering, but the number meant more than money. It meant trust. It meant he believed in me enough to secure my future. Then they appeared, my biological parents. The ones who had left me in an airport terminal at 5. They had aged, their faces lined with time, but there was a cold familiarity in their eyes. They claimed they had never stopped loving me. They insisted they had been forced to leave me behind. They said they were entitled to the inheritance because they had given me life. I stared at them, stunned, my throat tightened, my mind struggling to reconcile the memory of fear and loneliness with their sudden audacity. No apology, no acknowledgement of the years of suffering I endured. Only claims, only greed, only a lawsuit. Lawyers and court dates filled the next weeks. They dredged up every detail of my past, trying to twist abandonment into some kind of shared ownership, as if years of neglect could be compensated with money. But I had Daniel's love, Daniel's protection, Daniel's voice echoing in my head, and I had my own strength, the fire that had begun to burn inside me the day I was left alone in that airport. As the court date approached, I realized this wasn't just about the inheritance. This was about justice, about recognition, about proving that I was not a child to be discarded, a life to be rewritten at someone else's convenience. I would fight, not out of vengeance, but out of survival, and out of honor for the man who had chosen me when no one else would. For the first time in my life, I felt the old fear and pain transform into something else: determination. I was ready. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and nervous anticipation. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows, illuminating the faces of strangers who would soon pass judgment on a life I had fought so hard to reclaim. My biological parents sat across from me, their expressions smug, as if the years they had stolen from me entitled them to more than my anger. They thought they deserved my inheritance. The proceedings began, and one by one, evidence was presented: airport security footage from the day I was abandoned, signed statements from foster families documenting the neglect and fear I endured, school and medical records proving the years of struggle I had survived alone. Each piece was a nail in the coffin of their claims, yet I felt no satisfaction in their humiliation, only a quiet, growing strength. Then the moment arrived that changed everything. My lawyer handed the court a sealed letter, one Daniel had written long before his death. The judge nodded, and his voice carried across the room as the letter was read aloud. To my child, by choice, not by chance. Anyone who abandoned you forfeited the right to benefit from your life. This inheritance is not a gift, it is protection. Protect it, use it, and remember that you are loved more deeply than words can hold. The room seemed to hold its breath. I felt Daniel's presence beside me, his hand on my shoulder, his quiet reassurance filling every empty space in my chest. My parents shifted uneasily, their eyes darting, searching for a loophole, a justification. There was none. The judge's gavel came down with a finality that resonated in my soul. "The court finds in favor of the respondent," he said, pointing to me. "The claim of the plaintiffs is dismissed, and they are ordered to pay legal fees incurred." I exhaled slowly, the tension in my body dissolving. Relief washed over me, but so did an unexpected peace. I had won more than a legal battle. I had reclaimed my dignity, my sense of self, and the affirmation that I was never at fault. As my biological parents were escorted out, their faces flushed with anger and shame, I didn't feel triumph or cruelty. I felt freedom, freedom from the ghosts of my past, freedom from the fear and longing that had haunted me since I was 5. And most importantly, freedom to live fully, carrying the love of the man who had chosen me, not abandoned me. Later, I walked through the empty courtroom alone. I pressed my hand to the worn wood of the bench where I had sat, imagining Daniel beside me, smiling. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about hatred or punishment. It was about living well, protected by the love that others tried to deny me. For the first time, I could finally whisper without fear. I was never abandoned. I was chosen. I was loved. And that love, Daniel's love, would carry me through the rest of my life, unshakable and everlasting.